안녕하세요. 림베이시 싱가포르 남자입니다. 네, 안녕하세요, 여러분들. So, yeah, today just tell you guys a little story. Not once upon a time, it's somewhere in some country there was this very beautiful garden. Okay, this garden is called the Garden of Contemplation. It is so beautiful. Birds chirping, beautiful flowers, all four seasons, and it's just clear skies every day, and a great place for people to go to sit down and think. That's why it's called a Garden of Contemplation. So one day, this dude, John Doe is an average guy who just lost his job. He still has to pay for his house mortgage, still has to put food on the table for his children, for his kids. He still has to pay his car loan, and he's just lost his job. He feels like he just feels like the whole world just come crashing down on him. But he's still wearing nice. He's still wearing a nice suit, you know, his working suit. He's still in his suit, nice leather shoe, nice watch even, and even some money in his, like a few $100s in his pocket. So he went to the garden and he sat down, and he went like, oh. And then at that time, somebody else came into the garden. Someone everybody knows from the news. Bill Gates. Bill Gates walks into the garden. He barely saw him. John Doe was so lost in his pain and misery that he didn't notice Bill Gates walk in. So Bill Gates walked in. Bill Gates was wearing his usual, just his very cheap looking shirt, very cheap looking, very cheap looking, very old pair of glasses. In fact, he don't even have money in his pocket. Okay, he didn't bring any cash. And no money in his pocket. He's dressed up, kind of haggard. He's like kind of too normal. Very old looking clothes, very old spectacles, and he just sat there in the garden, thinking about the next Save the World project. Right, and then someone else came into the garden. Donald Trump. But this Donald Trump was in his early 30s, where he just lost everything, and he's like in billions of dollars debt. But he still dressed very well, and in his pocket he has several $1,000s cash in his pocket. He has got this huge gold chain around his neck. Well dressed, but he's broke as hell and bankrupt and in billions of dollars of debt. So he just sat there and thought about his life. At this moment of time, I call them the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges are sitting in the same place, in the same garden. But how many different, are they living in the same world? No. Each of them are living and in the same world, right? But now think about this. How can three persons sitting in the same place be living in three different worlds? Does that make sense? Does that sound like insanity? You are sitting, three persons, in the same most beautiful garden in the world, but living in three different worlds. How does that work? So God, they didn't know that God was in the garden and he was watching. So God went like, there. God shook his head, boom, magically turns out a huge 100-ton hammer, the Acme hammer, big black hammer, and he knocked each one of them on the head, bong, 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 and then go like, and in that instant, all three of them forgot who they were, who they are, what they were doing before coming to the garden. They barely remember how they got to the garden. So at that moment, they kind of woke up to the world, right? And the first thing is they started looking around. Wow, this is a beautiful garden. All three of them were looking at the same garden now. Wow, such a beautiful place. And they started looking at each other. Wow, okay, you are here. And then they have no idea who they are, where they are. And so they started looking at everything, including themselves. John Doe looked at himself. Oh, I'm dressed pretty well and I have a few $100 in my pocket. Not bad. And I'm here in the beautiful garden. Well, this is good. And then Donald Trump, who is supposed to be super broke, looked at himself. Wow, oh, I have thousands of dollars in my pocket and gold chain. Wow, I am pretty rich, man. I'm pretty. And they looked around, and he looked around, and he looked at the other two guys and got, I'm richer than any one of you here. And then Bill Gates went like, oh gosh, my clothes are all old and torn. Oh, he looked in his pocket, no cash, and took out his glasses. Oh, he's old and even faded. Well, I'm the poorest of them all. So they looked at each other, but they all looked at the same garden, the same world. At last, all of them came to the same world by forgetting who they were up to that point in time. And up to that point in time, they could only see on themselves. They were actually, Donald Trump was actually existentially quite rich. Bill Gates was existentially quite poor. He's got nothing in his pocket. And Joe Doe was doing pretty well. He still got some money and all that stuff. And this is the real world. And this is exactly how all of us are creating our own misery. In the story world, in the created history, in all the past, where we come from, who we were, what happened in our life, you created this hell called the story world. And because of this story world, three persons sitting in the same place can live in three different worlds, when existentially they're in the same place. You see how this works? So no matter what situation you are in right now, you may be broke, may be miserable, trust me, I've been there. But when you learn to keep aside all this story and let the story world be just a story, keep it aside like a cloud server, and you start to become aware of where you are, of your health, of what's in your pocket, of what's in your immediate surrounding, you start to realize and feel deeply, hey, I'm not doing as bad as I think I am. In fact, people who are supposed to be very rich like Bill Gates could actually feel very poor in the real world, you know, like in the story, right? So you might be saying, well, it's easier said than done. Okay, but first of all, I need you guys to understand that I have been there. I've not always been at the top of my life. I've been up and then badly down, up and then badly down at least twice in my life over the past 20 years, okay? So there were times that I had to force myself to understand that I am living in the real world and the real world is beautiful. In order to live another day, if I were to keep myself in my story world 24 hours a day, I would commit suicide. It was that bad back then when I fell from grace, you know. So the thing is, you can spend 24 hours a day just thinking about your lost job, about all the bills that are coming up at the end of the month. You can spend 24 hours a day thinking about that, which means living in that world 24 hours a day. But the thing is this, it's not going to help at all. It helps nothing. But when you learn to come to the real world and you experience life rather than the story, life is always beautiful and good. It's the story that's miserable. Once you realize this distinction, you start to be able to plan time to handle these things in your story world. I need to do this, I need to get a job. Okay, this is when I make a plan. This is when I get a job. By the end of the month, if the bills come, this is what I do, this is what they do. Take this plan, put it, boom, you're done. You come back to the real world. It's time to do each of these steps, you do each of these steps. This is how you use the real world not as an escape. This is not escape. Actually, the story world is the escape, you know, because story world is a man-made story. You escape to your story, right? There's no such thing as anybody escaping to reality, but the thing is, everybody's got it upside down. The story is the misery. The reality is the heaven. Check out my video on if heaven and hell exist, right? So now you may be wondering, so how do I do that? It's so hard. Yes, it's hard. Why? Because your mind is not trained to inhabit the real world. Since the moment we're born, we have been building up our story world, and the brain has been trained to exist in the story world habitually because it created the story world, right? You look at the real world, where's the bad president? Where's the deaths? Where's the natural disasters? Oh, it's not here. But of course, you may find yourself in that kind of a real world if you're in the situation, or that's another story altogether, right? But it takes training for your brain to rip itself from the story and come to the real world, which is again why I keep promoting this so much. Is my story world meditation system. It's not a spiritual thing, it's not a religious thing. It is a brain training system to train your brain to work away from the story and to form the habit of being in the real world, where there's no stress, where there's freedom, where your spirit can be free. It's in that story world that you cannot be free, you know. So my whole system is designed just to do that, and I personally have benefited hugely from it. From those of you who are familiar with spirituality and all this stuff, it is a mindfulness Zen meditation based kind of thing. So it's not spiritual, it's not religious, you know. It's a way to train your brain to serve a certain function. So check out the playlist, my story world playlist for the full system. It's for free. Go try it. Let me know how it works for you in the comments below, right? 안녕.